What's happening, fam? L.A.R. movement still moving. Book is entitled Lessons from a Non-Custodial Father at Amazon Kindle and Create Space. A link will be in the description box below as usual. This video is entitled Modern Day Sharecropping. Talked about this type of topic on a few other occasions, so sometimes I just feel like to refresh it, right? We don't think about our current economic state as sharecropping because I would say Americans' lifestyle have been on an incline as far as material things, right? Quality, not so much, but outside veneer look of materialism, yes. Now, the thing about this is, for years we've talked about the cost of living has increased, but wages really haven't. So, what is the model of sharecropping? To get a quote-unquote business owner to have somebody to employ them and financially run them into the ground while they're producing mass quantities of profit for you. So they can never necessarily get freedom financially, economically, because you mathematically put them in the hole to begin with, or you mathematically keep them there. What was that? The Mac, was that Pretty Tony? I keep a bitch broke. The society pimps you, and they keeping you hoes broke. Us hoes, broke. And people don't think about how many ways people are sharecropping, because if the cost of living pretty much stays the same, but the price of housing keep going up. Like, some of y'all don't know, like, if you, say you paying a mortgage, right? If you got good credit and you got a low rate, and you say you live in a decent area, well, your mortgage may be a fixed rate, it'll stay the same, but the more they quote unquote gentrify, if you're in the inner city, or add on to the amenities and ambiance of your suburban lifestyle, the higher your taxes get. The more they want to divert more things, more business to your area to generate more revenue for people coming. But in generating all this business, you got to pay high taxes. So what winds up happening over and over again, people get, their mortgage may stay the same, but they're taxed out of their neighborhood. And some people don't get that. That's why some states used to have and I think some states still do, they have a max where after you pay so many years, or so much money in taxes, as far as like homeowners and stuff like that, you stop. They done. That's it. That house is pretty much paid for, because you wind up taxing out your residents to the point where you ultimately turn your place into a ghost town. But in some ways that's sharecropping, because you keeping the neighborhood recycling with new people, so you're selling this house numerous times over and over and over again. So this is a way to financially, the cost of living keeps you at a certain level. The taxes keep squeezing you financially to the point where you got to go somewhere else. So you're constantly recycling the money in the economy in and out of this community, because some people want to move in these certain places and some people have to move out of these certain places. So you constantly flip-flopping, using new people in and out of the economy. That way you can generate what you can generate financially from them, where you can strike while the iron's hot. They don't know that, because a lot of times we're purchasing things on emotionalism and the American dream type thing. So, problem. The education sharecropping. For decades, they kept telling people, go to school, get an education. And if you was born in the 80s, you was a child of the 80s, even 70s, 60s. Education was always pushed. The difference is the cost of education in the 70s, 80s, 90s compared to now is too much. Too much. You know. Don't get it twisted. Like the cost of living was different, so the price was different. But you know, we're talking about an era where if you made roughly maybe $40,000 a year, you can afford everything, and even a side family. That's how some people had side families, but other people couldn't do that. That's why the middle class was so great, because they actually made far more than they needed to make on far less education, but they was able to afford education for the next generation, or at least one of them, and have the others work their way through, you know. But now education, the cost is so high that it's built in. Like at this particular point, I think your student loans, if I'm not mistaken, because one of my homeboys is a banker, I think your student loan debt is now built into your if you apply for a home, your mortgage payment. You know, I think it's like something like it's 10%. Like they add a fixed amount. Like if you own if you have $100,000 in student loan debt, then they take 10% of that and put it into your mortgage to say, you know, and roll in it, because you're gonna have to be paying both of these payments simultaneously. So they do it that way. So you're sharecropping because now you want land or home, but you already are in the hole because your education plantation has you owing them for that piece of paper, and now you're paying with your life's work, basically. And then you got to get to like the smaller things, like insurance. It's funny because the older I have relatively a very clean driving record, but my insurance for the last 15 years I've been praying the same thing. You know, they say the older you get, the less your insurance goes. Not when you're a black man. Nah. My insurance keeps going up. Driving records, clean as a mug. Insurance keeps going up. Oh, it's the cost of living. No, it's not, because I have, you know, people on my job who are not black or black women. They have and who've had wrecks and all kinds of other stuff. They pay less insurance than I do. Now, and I clown with my mother about this. I said, you know, you would think that, you know, by stereotypes, white men, white women, Asians and Hispanics would have the highest insurance. Because they all, you know, because white men are notorious for racing cars and wrecking them. White women are notorious for just, you know, cutting people off and wrecking cars and not paying attention to the road, because it's all about actuaries, right? Asians are constantly known, are stereotyped for people who cause other people to have accidents, and Hispanics have the stereotype of not having insurance and not being legal. So you would think that goes into play when it comes to their insurance costs, as long as when it's driving, you know. And we do have a stereotype of guys not having insurance too, so don't get it twisted. But here you go. But they don't. I hear they cost a certain, be like, what the what? Oh, this is my 15th accident. You still got insurance? Ain't that a bitch? But you got to take that in consideration, and you got to take into the consideration that how can I say this? Food, gas, children. You know, the child support game, you know, I think 20-25% on your first child, then it's like, then it is. So they've already by how many kids you have, you're already financially set for how much you're going to lose off the rip. So a lot of this time, nothing frees you financially in this country. Everything constricts you to live off less and less and less. So that's why, I say you got to live way beneath your means. A lot of people don't understand being a minimalist because you become an adult and you want your freedom. And unfortunately, just like sharecroppers want their freedom, you're working yourself to death to get freedom that you might not get because you're financially behind the 8 ball. And you have to think about this in a different aspect. If you're going to school, you got to think about cutting costs. If you're thinking about employment, you got to think about how far you are from work to save you gas mileage and time and gas money. You got to think about the cost of eating out versus the cost of cooking. You got to think about, playing every aspect of the system to get ahead. You got to think about, if you want to go to the movies, matinee versus real, whatever after the matinee price. You have to think about you got to think, do you really need cable? Do you really need as much entertainment as you need? Because everything, and a lot of times entertainment is escapism, but escapism is a big business because we're sharecropping to an extent that we're using coping mechanisms to get us through the next week. And that's, entertainment, leisure, alcohol and all that other stuff. And you got to put into all of those things that health is also another thing, because it's set up that to run you into the ground, but not for you not to be able to have medical insurance for in most cases, because sometimes when you're young, you don't think you need it because you're not thinking about it, but also you're young and you may be broke and you can't afford it. And unfortunately, your family might not have the foresight to say, okay, well, we're going to get you an insurance policy, a life insurance, and a medical insurance. That way, if anything ever happens to you, you already covered. They don't do that. So by the time you become a certain age, you might have certain health problems. And now your even with your youth, your health insurance is high as hell. So, and it's better to get it younger than older because, it's going to rise over the years. But if you keep a relatively good, clean bill of health, you're going to do all right. But a lot of people don't do that because of how society is set up. So to me, it's like a lot of modern day sharecropping, to the point where, I'm glad I really stopped watching television a lot, because a lot of people are just like children, and watching television and the escapism of television makes you want to buy stuff into American Dream. So now you're buying things to cope, and you're really stagnating your financial independence. So, but we don't look at these things a lot of times because we don't know better. Some people get mad that people join the military, but it's a hell of a trade-off. But you won't, if you do it right, you won't have to pay taxes on your home when you get that. Use your GI Bill to go to school, if that'll work for you. You get a check while you're on the base, so you don't necessarily have to get the housing part. You know what I'm saying? So you can create a nice little nest egg and a lifetime of benefits when you hit a certain age, not age, but certain years of service, and some of that service translates over to certain professions, yada yada yada. So there are ways to beat the system. I mean, everybody else, you see people want to be rich and famous because that gets them out of sharecropping, in my opinion. So, I'm going to leave it at that. And just tell me what you think. We out.